A part of most crimes is knowledge. We're the Armed Attorneys. Today we're talking about how living with a felon can affect your rights as a law-abiding gun owner. We're going to be talking about what a felon is, kind of the pitfalls when it comes to possession, how these situations come up, whether it's in your home or your vehicle, and some other pitfalls that we see people fall into and some best practices, so you won't want to miss it. But before we begin, show your support for the Second Amendment by hitting that like button. And today we're joined by Chase Waterwall. Hey Chase, how are you?
Pretty good. Glad to be here.
Stepping in for Emily. Thank you for joining us. And to start off, we have to cover these basics. But first, let's talk about what a felon is. And a felon is someone who's been convicted of a crime where under federal law they could have been imprisoned for more than 1 year. Under state law, it's generally crimes where you're imprisoned or could be imprisoned for more than 1 year, or misdemeanors where the confinement is over 2 years, if they call them misdemeanors. And so when we look at who is a felon, it's someone who'd be prohibited from purchasing or possessing firearms or under 18 U.S.C. 922. And with that comes a deprivation of their rights. They are not allowed to purchase and possess firearms and ammunition for life, absent some extraordinary circumstances like judicial clemency or a pardon. Now, when we talk about felons, what we're most concerned about is transferring firearms. That would be a crime if I'm, law-abiding citizen, transfer or give a firearm to a felon. That's a crime under federal law and a crime under most states' laws. But the other thing that we have to kind of discuss a little bit in abstract when we get into our examples is possession. And so when we talk about possession, what does that mean to you, Chase?
So essentially what it's going to be is it's going to be when the firearm is in the person's care, custody, control, or management. Once it gets to one of those portions, it's going to be possession for, like you said, a convicted felon.
Yeah. So when we have some examples of that, care, custody, control, management, there's lots of different examples. Person holding on to an object, clearly they're in possession. Being able to readily access the item, that could be possession under some contexts, or having an object in a place that you have exclusive control over. Some states will call that possession. And so we, as law-abiding gun owners, let's say we have a family member or friend who's down on their luck, they're staying with us, they're a felon. We get this question from clients all the time saying, hey, do I lose my gun rights because a felon is living with me? And the general rule is no. But there's some extra things you got to know about it. So, for example, in the context of the house, let's start with the house first. What does making sure a felon isn't possessing a firearm inside of your house look like?
Essentially, what you're going to look at in a situation like that is making sure that they don't have access to the firearm. So that's going to mean that you have it in a locked away safe. That could be maybe under your bed, in your closet, and the safes that you might use would be something like a biometric safe where only you could open that, or it could be one that's got a lock or a combination on it, something that the felon in the household cannot gain access to the firearm.
Yeah, and I would say the best practice is only you should have the key, or only your fingerprint should work, and maybe even only you know where the safe is located, because a part of most crimes is knowledge, right? And so if the person has no knowledge of the firearm being present in the house, that's a good argument for them, because at the end of the day, while it wouldn't be a crime for you to have a firearm in your house with a felon there, we don't want to be perceived as transferring it, but we also, we don't want the felon to get in trouble and be accused of possessing the firearm when they're not possessing it. Now, I'll say the most common context this comes up and what we see in our practice is out in vehicles, because that's where we come into contact with, law enforcement most often. We get suspected of speeding, caught Emily Taylor, and it shows, and it gives law enforcement an opportunity to say, hey, look, this person's in possession of a firearm. Now, what would you say, Chase, is the best practice if you're transporting a firearm and a felon's in your vehicle?
So the first thing is you're probably going to be on the right side of the law if you have it on your person. It's going to be very hard to make an argument that the person that was in the vehicle that didn't have it on their person is in control or custody of that firearm. Otherwise, you could put it in a locked safe, maybe in the trunk. Be careful, though, if you're trying to put it in the glove box or the console, because that could be seen as something that they can readily access. So best practice, keep it on your person or in a locked away box.
As long as they're not possessing the firearm, as long as you're not transferring the firearm to them, generally you're going to be okay under federal law. Now, there are some quirks in state law, and so you need to look into those, and this is not all encompassing. So check out your state's law, but in the vast majority of situations, you shouldn't have any problems. Now, going back to that theme of, hey, we don't want this person staying with us to get in trouble, another consideration is whether the person is still being supervised or let's say they're on probation and they have a condition saying, hey, no firearms. And Chase, this is perfect for you because you used to be a probation officer. And so what do you tell your, probationers when, let's say they're staying with family or friends?
So essentially what I would say to somebody that's getting placed on probation as a probation officer is get the guns out of the house. But as somebody that's living in a home with somebody that may be on probation, you want to take every possible step to make sure that you're not going to be putting that other individual, the person that's on probation or supervision or parole, in jeopardy of going back to TDC or jail. So you're going to want to make sure that you follow these steps to make sure that they don't have access to the firearm. And again, that goes back to making sure that it's in a safe, it's locked away, and it can't be perceived as something that's in possession of the person that's being supervised.
Yeah, and so the other kind of quirky thing here is, and this is something you have to talk to your family member, your friend, the person who's staying with you, because they may have conditions of their supervision or conditions of their bond if they haven't been convicted that say, no firearms or no weapons in your household. And at that point, you really have to make a decision. Hey, do I want this person staying with me? Because at that point, it is infringing on your right to keep and bear arms, essentially, because while you're not disqualified from possessing firearms, it would get that person in trouble if you did. So that's a strong consideration you have to think about. Now, the last thing, and it ties into this conversation a little bit, so we have to mention it. Now, each state is going to be different on how you get your rights restored, and we couldn't go over them all at once, but in most instances, it's going to be for a state level crime, a pardon from the governor, or what's called judicial clemency if that court still has jurisdiction over the person. So that's something that if you're looking, hey, how do I get my firearms rights restored? That's where that person would seek that out. If they're convicted under federal law, that would have to come from the President of the United States under, executive clemency, a presidential pardon essentially. And that can be a real uphill battle. And if you're wondering, how do I get my rights restored? It's worth speaking to an attorney in your state. They can advise you the odds and chances of success and whether that's a prudent thing to do or steps to take forward for you to accomplish. But we hope you enjoyed this discussion. If you did, consider subscribing, hitting that like button, and help us fight the anti-2A algorithm by sharing this video. And as always, we read all of your comments and questions below, and that's where we source a ton of these videos. So make sure to leave us a comment. And until next time, we're the Armed Attorneys.